We are living in an American culture that has shifted from tolerant to cancel culture, from supportive to disruptive, from decent to rude, from optimistic to cynical, and from relatively safe to increasingly violent. Many are willing to exchange their liberty for a form of socialism. Through this podcast, we will chart a course to get America back on track.
Hi, I am Farah, daughter of Barry Farah. My dad's a best-selling author, CEO across 6 industries, and former candidate for governor of Colorado. He is also a private pilot, adventurer, and engaging life coach. I should know. Through Culture Shift, my dad will systematically deliver a fresh and compelling path that will help you create your own American dream.
Hey, welcome back to the Barry Farah Show, Culture Shift. In 2020, small businesses were required to shut down or limit their capacity to sell to their customers, while large businesses were able to gobble up all their customers and continue to engage in business full throttle. This gave an unfair competitive advantage to the large businesses. In fact, the large companies grew dramatically, while as many as 40% of the small businesses suffered irreparable harm. Some will never come back. Today, what I'd like to do is just speak with you a bit about the impact of the Mayflower Compact on small business. First, a little history. In 1620, English settlers traveled to the New World on a boat called the Mayflower. They were headed for what was called the Northern Virginia area. Today, that would actually be southern New York. Anyway, this storm came along and it blew them north to near Cape Cod. And while they were still on the boat, anchored just offshore, the Mayflower Compact was signed by all the men, Puritans, adventurers, and the tradesmen. It set some rules for self-governance. The lasting takeaway is pretty wonderful for the everyday person. The government shall apply all laws equally. You can't pick winners and losers. It's implicit in their journey that they wanted a limited government. But it's really important to note that no one wanted zero government. That results in everyone making up their own rules as they go along, and that's chaos. Somebody might want to steal from you, and they might think that that's okay, or much worse. So no serious student of political science is an anarchist. But anarchy is what almost happened. There were 50 men, 19 women, and 33 kids, and only 41 of the 102 were Puritans seeking freedom from the Church of England. The rest were merchants, craftsmen, there were a couple of indentured servants, and orphaned children. So before landing at Cape Cod, but after the storm, the adults among the 61 non-Puritans wanted to be released from any and all obligations. Basically, their argument was pretty simple. Hey, look, we had a contract, but it meant that we had to land in Northern Virginia, and we're not in Northern Virginia, and so our contract is void. We need to be relieved of all the obligations. And by the sound of it, things were degenerating quickly on the boat before they were coming ashore. So the Puritans, led by William Bradford, scrambled. I mean, if they didn't take control of the situation quickly, once everyone got on shore, it would just be chaos. It'd be everyone for himself. William Bradford, the famous 30-year governor of the Plymouth colony, described the drama on the boat as several strangers, those who were the non-Puritans were called strangers, made discontented and mutinous speeches. But the Puritans prevailed. It was actually a very brief document, and it was probably written by the very well-educated Puritan William Brewster. Now, you can argue more meaning into it than this, but the main contribution of the Mayflower Compact is the voluntary commitment to be governed by equal laws. Funny enough, all the signers of this document had to sign the compact just to get off the boat. But on November 11th, 1620, all the men, including the 2 indentured servants, signed it. One of the signers, Miles Standish, was an English military officer. He served in Queen Elizabeth's army, and he was stationed for a time in Holland. That's where he met and became friends with John Robinson and the Pilgrims, who were living in Leiden. Standish was hired by the Pilgrims to be their military captain, to establish and coordinate the colony's defense against all the enemies. And the domestic ones would have been considered to be the Native Americans. The foreign ones were considered to be the Dutch and the French and the Spanish. So he was going to be their military commander and keep them safe. This guy really was kind of a stud, though. I mean, he had some glaring weaknesses, but he was a short guy in stature, and he had a real quick temper. But he's one of the few that didn't get sick at all in the horrible first winter, and he did a lot to help care for the people who did survive. Standish led or participated in almost every early exploratory mission that came out of the Plymouth area. You know that Plymouth settlement that you've toured? Well, he helped with site selection. He got the colony's cannons all set up. He oversaw the construction of the fort there at Plymouth. He led the trading expeditions and the military expeditions to the various Indian groups in the region. He was also the guy who was way too heavy-handed in his revenge attacks on the Indians, so he wasn't perfect. Standish was sort of the sheriff, police chief, and the military leader all in one. But warts and all, he played a really important role in enforcing the new laws and in protecting the colonists. The first winter was really brutal. Way too many people died. And the survivors are really an amazing testimony of perseverance by any account. One of those survivors who lived the longest after the Mayflower Compact is John Alden. He was about 21 years old when he was hired from Southampton to be the barrel maker for the Mayflower's voyage to America. His contract actually gave him a choice. He could stay in America after he got over to this new world, or he could return to England. He decided to stay. He actually had the hots for a fellow Mayflower passenger by the name of Priscilla Mullins. They got married, according to history, sometime between 1622 and 1623 in that year. She was this orphaned young lady who originally was from Surrey in England. Her parents and brother all died in the first winter at Plymouth. So she got all of that inheritance. So together they were quite the team, this married couple. She had the inheritance and all the shares that came from the death of her parents and her brother, and she was strong and fertile. She cranked out 10 kids. John Alden was a skillful carpenter. He was this barrel maker, but he quickly rose up to become a prominent member of the Plymouth colony. In fact, he was elected assistant to the famous Governor Bradford, as early as 1631, and he was regularly reelected. Some of these Plymouth colonists were also buddies. John Alden and Miles Standish and some other colonists together founded the town of Duxbury to the north of Plymouth. Alden served the town of Duxbury as deputy to the Plymouth court through all the 1640s, and he served on several committees and sat on several councils of war. He also served for a time as colony treasurer. So about 1653, he built the Alden House, which is still standing today, and is maintained by the Alden kindred of America. He died in 1687 at the age of 89. Keep in mind, the compact went all the way through 1691. So he's one of the last surviving Mayflower passengers and the last one to sign it. His most famous descendant is John Adams, founding father and second president of the United States. So these early Americans had their share of obstacles, but I mean, goodness, half the people died in that horrible first winter. But those that lived long enough to see the fruit of their labor advanced through their lives with courage and anticipation and an optimism that was pretty special. I mean, they were free to build and develop due to this really simple legal system that was built around the Mayflower Compact. It wasn't a constitution, but it was supposed to be this short-term temporary document. But again, it was the guiding document for all the adult lives of all the signers. It governed the manner in which the New World would establish and comply with laws all the way to 1691. So for that 71-year period, the laws that were developed, I mean, they weren't perfect, but they applied equally to everyone, and they required common consent, and they encouraged personal responsibility. Have you ever read the Mayflower Compact? I mean, if you skip the intro and just skip the signature at the end, I can read it to you, the full body of it to you in just a minute. Here it is. Having undertaken for the glory of God and advancements of the Christian faith, in the honor of our king and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia, do by these presents solemnly and mutually in the presence of God and one another, and covenant and combine ourselves together into a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid, and by virtue hereof enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and offices from time to time as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good. That's it. So the colonists would remain loyal subjects to the king, King James, and concurrently govern themselves. They'd create and enact laws of their own for the good of the colony, and they would abide by those laws. The laws would apply equally. They would live in accordance with the Christian faith. That was it. It was an early and successful attempt at democracy. It shaped the nation. One of the benefits of equal treatment under the law is it opens the door for the new or small business to succeed. I mean, if he's got equal access to the market, he can offer a better product, a better price or service than his bigger competitor, and he can have a real shot at success. Unfortunately, what happens more often than not is that bigger companies have the resources to lobby or otherwise shape the government for special treatment. And they do. They lobby for certain regulations that make it harder for the small guy to compete. And as they become bigger and bigger, they create barriers to entry. And unfortunately, this has absolutely happened in the United States many times. However, the concept of equal treatment allows for that budding entrepreneur to achieve great success without government interference. So though it's been imperfect in how it's been implemented, the idea is that the small business can compete on an equal playing field legally. Now, in a whole bunch of countries, they've got a limited form of capitalism, and what they offer is not much for the small guy. So let's take an example of Egypt, Haiti, or Peru. A very few number of individuals are wealthy, and they control the levers of government. The poor can't own property for themselves. They're trapped in poverty. Outsiders don't come in to invest because it's too precarious. You don't really get free and clear title. And the property values for these businesses, the little ones, never rise. So basically the system is rigged. In fact, in some instances, the regular guy doesn't own the property, and it can take years to get through the red tape just to start a new business. Unlike what a previous anti-private property POTUS said in the United States, if you build it, you actually did earn it. If you build it, it actually is your business. And the United States believes that it's yours. You own it, and you should enjoy the rewards of all the risk you took. Government shouldn't just come in and take your business profits. In those countries where capitalism is allowed only for the well-connected and where everyone else has weak private property rights, you don't get true and clear and clean title. You always effectively are navigating through a bureaucracy that limits you and controls your upper potential. You're basically working for the government, even if you're trying to work for yourself. I mean, you're allowed to take a little bit to take care of your needs, but not really become wealthy or not really improve your life. And everything is only after the government gets its take in those kinds of environments. What was really amazing and fantastic about the original concepts that guided America is that you would have no fear of the government taking away from you what you built. It wasn't the government's to begin with. You were free to build it without fear. One of the laws that the colonies implemented to make sure that this was the case was a just compensation clause. They borrowed from the English practice, which was developed at about the same time in the early 17th century. The king couldn't just take your land anymore. Parliament would now have to authorize the taking of property, and they would have to either declare a value of your land or your property, or they would provide some kind of a judicial proceeding to determine it. But the problem in England was that the proceeding was held without the presence of the owner. The American colonies made it mandatory that the owner could weigh in on the value of his property. This was huge. If and only if the government has no alternative but to take your property for a road or other such purpose, it must pay you market value for your property because it's not the government's to take, it's yours. So if government can prove that it's a public good to take it and it has no alternative, it has to pay up. So these concepts of fair and equal treatment created an incentive for people to take control of their own lives, and it created unbelievable opportunity. Later, when all this was codified in the U.S. Constitution, people from all over the world immigrated to the United States, many without any specific plan per se. They just knew they could participate in this amazing equal treatment environment. So let's take a minute and look at what the Bible has to say on this topic. I'm just going to touch two things. First, the Bible encourages a transcendent attitude in your work. It encourages you to throw yourself at it, your mind, your will, your emotions, everything, your soul into it. It encourages you to go for it, to engage with gusto. A passage in Colossians 3, verse 23 says, "Whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord." When you break down that verse, it's everything you've got. Now, I mean, if you were going to do your work heartily, where you put everything you've got into it and you can't get any reward or any benefit from it, it would almost seem cruel. And Christians have worked with this transcendent purpose to the glory of God in very difficult situations. They could own property way back in the early days in the Roman Empire, but there were many obstacles we don't have today. Regardless, the Christian was encouraged to work with abandon, to give it his all. Now, if you take that idea where you give all yourself to the work and really do a great job with excellence, and you put that in the context of a biblically organized civil government, you get what the U.S. has enjoyed for so many decades. You get access to the rewards in an environment where you can engage with a personal investment of your time and ingenuity without overbearing government constraints. I mean, the Bible actually exhorts us to promote and accept limited government. Have you ever thought about that? It's in 1 Samuel 8. God says, look, if you want a strong executive branch, you want this king without proper checks and balances. I mean, if you really want this king, you need to know he's going to take your sons and daughters against their will. He's going to determine what their vocation is, including your daughters being part of his harem if they're pretty. He'll take the best of your land without giving you fair consideration for it. He'll take 10% of all you earn. Don't you wish today that it was only 10%? He'll take the best of your employees. So God's warning them, saying, look, it's not good for you to be ruled by one person or one branch of government versus a distributed checks and balances based government. The Bible also teaches, in addition to limited government, private property. You can find that in Exodus and Deuteronomy, as we've discussed on our previous episodes. And the Bible also teaches liberty, big time, as we've discussed at length. The Father invented freedom. So when you incorporate limited government with private property and freedom, this transcendent purpose concept that we find in Colossians 3, it encourages the believer to develop a mission and a vision in his or her little business that hopefully could grow big. That vision includes how to treat your employees with respect and how to conduct your business practices with integrity and how to serve your customer with excellence. And these concepts combine to allow you to own the business and the free cash flow and the net worth that comes from it. And you can freely take the risk. You can invest your thoughts, your time, your money, your energy, and you can build something great. And you can enjoy the rewards without fear that the government will willy-nilly change the rules to your detriment. So, that's the first idea that comes from equal treatment under the law in the Bible. It makes it a fair environment for you to throw yourself into it, to give your all to it. The second concept that came soon after the Mayflower Compact was this idea of just compensation. It keeps the government in its place. It keeps the government humble as the servant of the people. Certainly, government should not be the landowner by fiat. Now, let me give you a biblical story just to drive the point home. One of the kings in the time of the Old Testament was a man by the name of Ahab. At this time, the government had increased in size and power dramatically. Ahab, along with his evil wife, Jezebel, was an abusive government. An example of that is found in 1 Kings 21, verse 1 through about 20. Ahab offers money for the private property of Naboth. But Naboth, who has this beautiful vineyard, doesn't want to sell it to Ahab. And the vineyard is not in any way, shape, or form, it's not on the way to a major road. There's no need for the government to have Naboth's land. Ahab just wants it for his personal enjoyment. When Naboth defends that it's his to keep and not the government's to take, Ahab's evil wife Jezebel has Naboth stoned to death under a trumped-up charge. This is what power does to evil people. So what happened? Jezebel wrote a letter and had her husband's seal placed on it. The letter ordered the power elite in Naboth's community to concoct a false accusation against Naboth. They hired scoundrels to claim that they heard Naboth curse God and curse the king. It was fake. It was wrong. It was a fake trial. But the power elite in Naboth's town, subordinated to the king and the government, had him executed. And this is just so Ahab could have Naboth's vineyard. I mean, the evil king didn't do the work to plant and grow the beautiful vineyard. He just admired it and he wanted it. I mean, he was willing to pay for it, but Naboth owned it. And you can't force a guy to sell his property. Naboth said it was very special to him, that it was the inheritance of his ancestors. And for that reason, he just couldn't sell it. Well, the evil king Ahab wanted all the benefits after Naboth For all these generations had taken all the risk, and he had poured his heart and his soul into this beautiful, gorgeous vineyard. There was no due process. Incorporated in a fair, just compensation clause, there's got to be a genuine public need. There was no such thing here. The government power just wanted to force an unwilling seller to part with what he built. And since he didn't get his way, the evil king's evil wife used the power of the sword in an unjust manner to intervene and get what she wanted. What do you think this kind of arbitrary murder does to other entrepreneurs around Naboth's vineyard? I mean, it has a chilling impact, of course. It's really, really bad. But that is how it is with centralized, controlled governments. They intervene indiscriminately, at will. They change the rules after the investment has been made. This makes it really hard to know what a small business owner can rely on, and this makes it harder than it needs to be for the small business to succeed. The Mayflower Compact endured for 71 years. It promulgated equal treatment under the law, though there were fits and starts that we'll discuss another time. After the first horrible winter, the community implemented laws that encouraged equal treatment under the law. And boy, did that help the struggling community. Over time, these stabilizing and reassuring laws allowed things to flourish. And everywhere there's a free market, it's better. It's not just better for the business builder. It's better for the community at large. The free market allows for healthy competition. This drives the quality of the product or the service to be better, and it lowers the cost of it. It's better for everyone to treat people and businesses equally under the law. Let's hope our country can find its way back to allowing small companies to have same access, equal treatment as big ones. To your freedom and your success. God bless you.
Hi, I'm David Farah. Thank you for listening to my dad's podcast, The Barry Farah Show. Culture Shift. Click subscribe now to be sure you don't miss an episode. Share this podcast with your friends on social media and give The Barry Farah Show your 5-star rating. Check out today's show notes below this episode and at thebarryfarahshow.com. This podcast is also available in video format at The Barry Farah Show on YouTube. See you next time.